Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special recorded Fazcast here with Ben Corrado from, where are you from, Mr. Ben?
I'm over at Nerd Node, and we're working on the DeEEP project right now.
That reminds me, we got to get our little Nerd Node thing up in the corner there. There we go. Talking to Ben from Nerd Node, and Mr. Titan is here. Thank you for showing up, Mr. Titan. But shouldn't I be on this side like that, Mr. Titan?
If you desire to be on that side, if it makes that big of a difference, do it up.
Yeah, I'm sitting in a camper right now in the middle of the wilderness in Idaho. So I've got a whole bunch of different internet sources all aggregated together so I can chat with you guys.
That's awesome.
I spent the last 15, 20 years building IoT devices that run at the edge. And so I've built a couple different businesses focused on that and the security and remote deployment and management of those devices. So one of the companies was called Regato. I was the CEO and founder of that business. And while I was there, we sold 5 gateways, which are effectively very similar in architecture to these, into every single McDonald's worldwide, completely remotely managed, updated, and secured. I've got a lot of experience, and my COO from that, Chris, is also at NerdNode and DeEEP. Together, we bring a whole bunch of past experience on how to build these types of secure edge systems that can be compliant with international laws and best practices in the security standards environments. This isn't our first rodeo pushing out remotely managed edge devices.
With you out in your camper and Faz and I are in different time zones, we're getting together for a really kick-ass reason, talking about DeEEP. I'm a little confused. Start us off by telling us, was this week was a launch, a soft launch, a testnet? What's actually, where are we in this whole DeEEP process right now?
Yeah, so right now we're selling DeEEP devices that these ones will be the first devices going live. The first couple months of that will be in a testnet. So we're intending to sell 1,776 devices that will operate in that testnet to begin with. And it's a little play on like we're freeing Web3, finally getting it out of the clutches. It's our own revolution here. So these devices will be they're the early adopters that want to get in on the ground floor and participate early. They'll get to participate in those testnet rewards. We are planning on converting some of the testnet token over to regular mainnet token when we launch. And then once we launch mainnet, we'll do another device sale as well.
Nice. I've got my device. You talk about a device, right? So this device, is it going to be like, are we getting cell phones? What are we getting? These are what we call hard nodes, right?
Yeah. So it looks like this. This is one right here. So it's pretty small. And on the front, we've just got some USB ports and power switch. When you plug it in, it'll automatically power up. You will be able to expand some functionality over time with these USB ports. So we expect like adding external hard drives and things like that. If you want to add extra space, will be a possibility. And then on the back, a bunch of network ports down here. So we can do, there's 2 10 gigabit network ports and 2 2.5 gigabit network ports. So even if you have the like fastest fiber internet residential solution out there, you should be fine with this box. So lots of options there. There's even expansion for a graphics card in there, so that down the road, if people want to participate in some of the AI pieces, we can swap in different graphics cards, different things like that. We can also plug them in external over the USB 4 Thunderbolt connections. So lots of options on this box. It's very flexible, and it's a great box for us to launch with. the people who buy these initial boxes, I think, will be well positioned to upgrade them as they desire to earn more over time as well.
So that's scalability, like built right in, right? So
Yep.
I'm assuming here, right? Because I don't know the answer to this. That's why I'm asking the question. So with that scalability and the extra ports and the options for graphics cards, will it be like a platform where you're going to log into a dashboard and choose what you want to run on that? And perhaps if you need something, if you want to run something a little heavier, you'll be able to buy that accessory right then and there when you decide to run that workload?
That is close to what we're thinking. Our goal is not to make the accessories like a revenue generating source for us. So if you already got a USB hard drive, eventually you'll be able to plug that in and utilize it. We will keep a list of kind of what's acceptable and what nodes basically get enabled by adding those accessories. So I'll give you an example that we're working on right now. We're working with a company called Storage Chain, and they take IPFS nodes and they make them accessible as S3 buckets. So you can basically use IPFS the same way you use Amazon S3 buckets. It's awesome platform, but they can use many terabytes of drive space with those devices. And we've got a 1 terabyte drive in these boxes. It's an SSD, an NVMe SSD. So it's like ludicrously fast, which is awesome for running game nodes and database nodes and that type of stuff. But when we look at like bulk storage nodes, it's not as important, right, to have that high speed. So being able to plug in a USB expansion drive that can hold 10 terabytes on a spinning disk that, costs $50. That's kind of where we're heading with those guys. And so they'll probably be one of the very first node platforms where we're like, okay, if you want to, earn even more by running storage chain nodes that are large, plug in a USB disk, and that'll give you expansion capabilities. So we have immediate plans to be able to kind of offer this, and that'll let people be able to run bigger nodes. Also, some of the validator nodes require a few terabytes of drive space right off the bat. So being able to plug in some additional drives will let us be able to run, additional validator node. I think like Polygon maybe was one, and I can't remember exactly. It's on the website in our docs, but there's a couple validator nodes that need like 2 terabytes of drive space. So we didn't want to burden everybody with, okay, we're going to put a 4 terabyte SSD in here and it'll cost even more. Instead, people who want to participate in those types of solutions can just add that on as they want. Yeah, and we think that there's options down the road for, either external eGPUs and or internal GPUs too, that will enable yet again more node types that come online. If we look at some of the AI compute solutions that are out there right now, there's some of them that use consumer grade cards, but for the most part, they're using the pro cards, and those don't fit in this box. They're really targeted for, they cost 50 grand a piece also. So they're, so they're mostly for data center use at this point. But I think we'll see specialized AI compute solutions come down the pipe. If you look at what Google did a few years back with Coral for video transcoding and a neural processing unit effectively, I think we'll see the same thing start coming for other AI use cases where we get dedicated silicon that'll be able to plug in over time.
So I wanted to step back a little bit because and kind of establish a little bit more what these do. So these
Sure.
little units that you have, they run software for you, right? Or they run
Correct.
software for the person who purchases them. And I guess the goal there is, to run node software of some sort or any software.
I'll break it down in a couple different pieces here. So first off, somebody buys, the physical box. That person may or may not own any nodes or software themselves that they want to run. It's okay. They don't have to run it themselves. Nerd Node, what our job is to link up people who have node software that they want to run with these boxes, right? And so we do expect, especially in our early adopters, a lot of people will buy them and have nodes and want to run their own node on the boxes, right? But these boxes can run lots of different nodes at once. Like they're high-end boxes. So we should be able to run 10 to 20 node types at a time on these boxes. And so what we're going to do is sell additional capacity that somebody isn't using for their own nodes. That'll get sold on nerdnode.io. The earnings from that, half the earnings from what gets sold will go straight to the device operator. That's one of the ways that we incentivize people to run these boxes is you're making half of what's getting paid for operating that node.
So I can basically have a blank node, so to speak, and I can sell the space and CPU on my node for others to use.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That is like the primary model here is you've got you've got some extra bandwidth and you're willing to say, yep, let this run here. And what we're seeing a lot of is, I had a call today with a node company and, their customers right now are mostly running this stuff on a data center, a single data center, right? So when it goes down or there's network connectivity issues, all their services go down, right? And so being able to put it in a whole bunch of different homes really spreads out that risk factor and delivers on the promise that Web3 has always had, that it's truly distributed.
That's kind of funny because it seems to be a technical solution to get around what every company has done to centralize internet service and stuff like that. Amazon has its servers out there that'll run anything and stuff like that. I think Facebook does the same thing, and and Microsoft does the same thing, and they've centralized a lot of this stuff. It's kind of funny because the internet was originally designed to be decentralized, and it's centralized over the years. And it's interesting to see that we have to force a decentralization in order to make things more fault tolerant, like node system and stuff. Okay,
yeah.
So
we're coming. Full circle is the wrong word. We're taking the best parts of Web 1, which was that the web was anybody could put something up and run it, and 1 or 5 companies didn't control all of the content and all of the flow, right? And then in Web 2, we get all this reliability because we've got some redundancy in these data centers, as well as high reliability connections, redundant power, all of that. And so we're taking the redundancy that has been built into Web 2 and the decentralization that was built into Web 1 and combining those and getting that same reliability we get out of Web 2 or better with truly decentralized pieces.
So I have a really interesting question or observation. I'd love to see from you guys when I'm running my node, because I did purchase one, I'd love to see some metrics on how much Nerd Node will make me with a blank Nerd Node versus nodes that I can run on it. So say I have a Bitcoin node, well, just some project node that makes me $5 a day. And
Sure.
I'd love to be able to see from you that I would get $6 a day from you. That way you can drum up business and you could say, hey, Faz, you can go ahead and run your node. Sorry, you can go ahead and run this Fred node or whatever, but we'll make you more if you just run it over here. That's what I'd love to see.
I think it's going to be a little bit of both, right? Like our goal is that node that's making you $5 a day, for instance, like you should be able to run that on the device alongside a bunch of other things. The way we've structured it, because NerdNode and DeEEP are doing all of the management of the node. So you won't have to, like, say you want to go put up an Ethereum node on here. Today, you would have to go in command line, type in a whole bunch of different commands, install the software. Then every couple of weeks, you have to come back in and update the software, make sure it's all running. If your power goes out, you have to recover all of it. We take all that away. And so all of that is handled by us and the box itself. So we got a whole bunch of automation in here, and we've got people on our team that are like keeping an eye on all that through metrics. And then if we have to manually go in and touch it, we will. So the way we've kind of built out DeEEP is you get rewarded for just having the box on with new minted token, right? So if you want to run your own nodes on here, basically that minted token for the device being on and usable can be used to pay for running your own stuff on this box. If you fill up the box 100%, you'll probably have to pay something, right? Because the minted token might not cover it. And we're going to see where all that lands. The market is ultimately going to drive a lot of that, because we're not going to set prices on what the token's worth or anything like that, right? And all this stuff gets paid in DeEEP. But for the most part, we think people will be able to run their own nodes for pretty much free on these boxes using some of the reward token that we're putting out to run that. And so what you'll have to decide then is the tokens that you're earning worth more than the service you're running, right? And there obviously are some services that pump out some shit coins, right? That aren't worth anything.
I can see there being space for NerdNode to want to optimize, or DeEEP Network to want to optimize how well its network is used by its node runners, by its hardware owners. And there's an opportunity there to encourage people with the tokens to
for sure
drop things that pay less. Again, if I'm running Fred node, 500 Fred nodes on my DeEEP node box here, and it's not making me very much money, I'd love it if to be rewarded just by having an empty box, and then of course I can run my Fred nodes elsewhere. I see some, especially when you're talking about AI too. I have some AI questions, but especially if you start having AI analyze how your big network is being used, I can see all sorts of interesting situations like that.
Yeah, one of the things we're working through, and we're creating a committee to help solve this as well, so that the community has significant input into it, is how do we do the allocation to devices? So if somebody comes on and says, oh, I'm going to host a Myria node, or I'm going to host a HighChain node, how do we decide, how does the network decide which box that gets assigned to? And so there's a couple pieces that we're looking at for that. One of them, or a couple of them, are user controllable. How much uptime has your box had? If you have a node that requires 100% uptime, our algorithm, our plan is to have that algorithm say nodes that have the best uptime get first priority for the ones that need 100% uptime. If a node like say it's a Myria node, they only need to be on for 6 hours a day. So boxes that go offline periodically, or aren't the best performers in the network, will be assigning to those devices that don't have the best reliability scores. So we're definitely looking at that as one of the ways where we figure out kind of like how to reward people for being the best operators of boxes in the network. If you've got it on and it's been on, consistently, you'll get assigned the nodes that need the most uptime, which presumably will be the ones that earn well as well, right? Now that correlation isn't 100% for sure, but that's one of the pieces. The other piece is bandwidth. We're working with a company to do proof of bandwidth on the nodes. So basically, we'll do challenges between nodes. So your node Faz will upload to Titan's node, and then Titan's node will upload to my node, and then my node will check your node, and we'll round robin that effectively until we get a consensus of how much bandwidth you have. And then based on the amount of bandwidth that that you have, will be able to assign different workloads. So ones that need lots of bandwidth will get assigned to devices that have lots of available bandwidth. We will be setting the pricing effectively for nodes that need lots of bandwidth will be higher than those that don't need lots of bandwidth, right? So people with fatter internet pipes will get rewarded better because those devices or those nodes cost more to run on the network, and they're earning 50% of that cost.
So that brings up a great question. Faz and I are podcasters, right? We're doing this show, and we hog a lot of bandwidth.
Yeah.
Are we going to be able to control how much bandwidth? So if we decide at 8:00 on Friday night we want to do a cast, we can tune it down for 2 hours and then do our casts so that we're not lagging like crazy and then tune it back up again? Or is that not something that's being considered?
Definitely being considered and planned. You'll be able to go into a dashboard and set the bandwidth limits for your device.
Oh.
So by default, the way it's going to work is when the box gets plugged into your network, we're going to do that proof of bandwidth test. And then we're going to set the consumption limits for the nodes, the average consumption limits or the median consumption limits, I suppose, to be half of what your available bandwidth is. So that we're never hogging 100% of your bandwidth all the time. Now, if you want to go in and say, take 100% of my bandwidth, I don't care, you'll be able to change that. Or if you want less, you'll be able to change that. When we look at it from kind of a generic perspective, that's the plan. Turning it down for 2 hours and then turning it back up, the risk there is if you turn it down, one of your nodes might need more bandwidth to be able to function and operate than you're giving it at that point, right? So the network might say, I have to reassign this node to a different device because there's not enough bandwidth at this site anymore. And there's no guarantee you'll get that back, right? Does that make sense right away, at least? Like then you'd go back into the pool for, hey, I have free space and this much bandwidth, assign things to me. Now, we're still working out kind of all the algorithms for all that, but that is the intent, is that basically if you drag that bandwidth slider down, we might end up having to kick software that's running on your node over to another device in the network. Does that make sense?
That's really good. Now, I understand the need for the network to take priority, right? Because the income coming in for both the DeEEP network as well as for the node runners depends on that being available. So I get that part, right. And you have to understand that up front. I see that as a genuine thing. That slider that you're talking about is fan-frickin-tastic, because everybody that I know is complaining about bandwidth issues because I've got two hard nodes and probably 4 soft nodes running on this. Plus I cast, plus I do all the other things, and my kids game and my wife watches Netflix. Bandwidth is an issue. So having that default set at halfway is fantastic to start. I think that was a lot of forethought. I really, that impresses me.
So down the road, we're looking at, for folks who plug in between basically their router and their modem. If you plug this device in, so if you remember, we have got, we got a bunch of different network ports on the back. So one of these ports can be straight to your modem, and one of them can be to your internet router or to just a switch. And our plan is to make these boxes able to be a very high-end router, because the routing cost is quite low then. And effectively what we can do then is prioritize traffic for customers. So we can basically say, okay, all streaming, all voice calls, all video calls, all of that gets highest priority on the network above everything. This will not be in our testnet launch, but we're hoping in the mainnet timeframe, early mainnet timeframe, we'll have ability to do that, where you can set priority for different services. What that would actually do is allow, like our stream here that we're doing right now, it would even take precedence over your other hard nodes and your other soft nodes that you might be running at your house, or
Wow.
Netflix that your wife is watching. So I think, and that's all open source software that doesn't cost us anything to add. It's just time to get it all built into the system, right? We're very aware that, you know, people work at home, right? Like I work at home. And so you can't have your internet compromised by a passive income source, right? Your active income cannot be behind your passive. We know that that's a priority for people, and you know, we want to make sure that we're providing a good experience, and it doesn't benefit anybody if these boxes get unplugged, and we know they will get unplugged if they use too much internet.
You know, you could,
Family members will
if
just go
you're going to have
unplug.
an AI component of this, you can always do an auto speed thing where you can, if you're in between the router and anything else, you can tell everybody that's on the network. You can even analyze what everybody on the network is doing, how much bandwidth they're using, and so on, and throttle yourself accordingly.
And that doesn't even require any AI, to be honest. It's this, you know, commercial and a lot of open source routers, and even some of the prosumer routers have been doing this for years. You can look at the traffic types without inspecting the actual traffic itself and prioritize different content effectively. For our whole team, we're very privacy forward. I don't want to know what anyone is doing on their home internet. I don't care. Like, that's your business. I don't want any logs of that. I don't want
You don't want Faz's information. I promise you that.
Yeah, I don't want to know what you're watching.
I'm pretty tame.
I want to balance people's privacy against AI with a heavy lean towards privacy. And I think it's very important. Is basically in the middle. If people choose to put it in the middle, which isn't required, by the way. We're going to open source all of that code, so there's no like guessing game about what's running there and where the data is going and how that's being monitored. I think AI is a great tool. I personally don't have any plans to put AI in between all of my internet traffic.
I have a question that's more of a change of topic. This device between the router and any other devices I have makes me also wonder about security, because this is going to put you in prime position to be hacked. So
Sure.
how can we be sure that you know that you're not going to be hacked, or this network isn't going to be hacked?
There's a whole bunch of pieces we're putting in place on security. We could do a whole nother show on security alone. There's a couple pieces. So we start at the very base level, and the RAM is encrypted, the file systems are encrypted, the disks are encrypted. We're using the TPM to decrypt all of that information, and every single device has a unique TPM key. So if you break into one box, you won't be able to break into others. On top of that TPM, we are basically signing everything that gets sent in and out of the boxes. So we can validate that device on the network. That's also how the devices connect in to the backbone of the DeEEP network. So we can revocate any compromised nodes, and we do attestation that the boot process, as it comes up, that every piece of that boot process is signed, number one, and hasn't been tampered with. And if it has been tampered with, it falls back. So it falls back. We have an AB boot system, and it'll fall back to the last known good state and reboot, right? And so then you're rebooting into a clean environment. Then each device or each node software package on the device has a variety of different security levels that can be chosen. So you can choose to be in a shared VM, which will be basically the cheapest option. And that VM is isolated from the prime operating system, and it's jailed so that information can't get in and take a hold of any other VM, right? Then you can also choose to have a dedicated VM for your node. so that you're the only one playing in that space. And you can also choose to take a whole dedicated box. And we have a couple different node partners we're talking about that are interested in using up like entire resources of entire boxes. So those security pieces, we're basically jailing every single aspect all the way up the chain and making sure that that can't talk to the layer below it to ensure that security. So we've got a number of different security pieces built in there, both from a hardware level and a network level, to make sure we've got, a robust system for our customers.
Is there going to be any type of dongle or anything else that comes with this, or are there going to be security updates? And is there anything that we'd have to apply for this kind of stuff?
There will be security updates. At this point, we do not anticipate customers having to do anything for those security updates. These boxes themselves have Intel AMT capabilities. So even if everything completely goes sideways on these devices at a BIOS level, we can tell them to reformat appropriately using secure keys. There should not be any need for you to plug anything into the device to do updates, etc.
Well, I certainly like the idea in one sense that you guys could be offering a router solution, or maybe, or some people might think of it as a cable modem solution. It'd be nice if you could just plug this straight into the internet. Somehow, I think that once this idea gets going, then everybody's router is going to start running jobs for other people and stuff like that. So I have a feeling that this is kind of the beginning of some new way of utilizing excess CPU power. I mean, I could see in five or 10 years, once you hook up with your internet service provider, they're like, okay, well, now that you have internet, you want to configure it to use any idle devices to get a discount off of your bill and stuff like that. And of course, it's going to be pennies. Yeah. I can see this really catching on, and if you guys are able to run out ahead on this, then you guys could be those components that people put in their routers.
Yeah, it's certainly an area. I mean, that's a lot of what we did at Rigado was figure out how to make edge routers. We did it primarily for wireless injection, but all the software we built could run on like a Cisco device, for instance. Similar idea of how do you run edge containerized solutions right there at the front end of an edge network. The nice part is we've seen the hardware change over the last 5 years, really. It used to be you bought a box that it had one slow Ethernet port. It wasn't designed to be a router. It didn't have any hardware acceleration for network switching, any of that. And over the last 5 to 10 years, we've really seen a huge change in that, where there's quite a blur now between what is a computer and what is a router, right? And we're taking advantage of that.
So before we leave this subject, because you've mentioned edge routers and edge devices and stuff like that, can you briefly explain for some of the Titans out there what that means when you're talking about an edge device?
Sure. So a router is a device that takes packets in and then figures out where to send them. So, and it's sending them to multiple devices typically that are downstream. Now that could be, the router that sits behind your cable modem or fiber modem at your house that is serving up to your TVs, to your laptops, to your phones. And those are typically co-located with a Wi-Fi hotspot. Right?
It takes packets in from the internet and sends it to your TV and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So so your TV goes and says, hey, Mr. Router, I need this video from Netflix, right? Mm-hmm. And so the router figures out that, hey, when you're asking for something Netflix, you're not trying to talk to your smartphone, that it's trying to access an external device. And so it figures out where to route that externally to what's called a gateway. And then when that gateway returns that information, router figures out who that was destined for. So it knows that you were just talking to Netflix on your TV. That packet that just came from that same connection, that Netflix connection, needs to go to the TV and not to a cell phone. It traditionally has been filled by hardware, like dedicated hardware that's got fast routing capabilities and all that. We've seen a blur of that happening in software more recently. The processing speeds have picked up. More of that hardware has got embedded into commercial, COTS, off the shelf processors and network switch equipment. We can do a lot of that stuff that blends kind of what traditionally you look at as this cheap router that you bought from Linksys or Cisco now can just be a computer that is running a piece of software that's doing that exact same thing.
So an edge device is something that has something in it to make things easier to route?
Yeah, so an edge device typically does server-like actions, but it's not doing it in a server farm. That's what people mean by edge devices typically. So they're happening out. When you think about the internet, it kind of looks, like trees stuck together, right? These leaf nodes that are all funneling all the information into big centralized switching locations and CDNs, and then it gets filtered back out, right? And so edge nodes are operating server-like applications at those leaf, like the leaf of the tree, basically, right? And that's what decentralization and Web3 really promises, that now you're not having to traverse the whole tree every time you need this data. You can get it from your neighbor, and that'll reduce load on the network. It will reduce costs for multiple players to come in, because they're not having to pay to send these huge fat pipes to CDNs and other, data centers.
Titan, I know that you have some questions, right?
I do. I'm going to push on a button that I push on with everybody, and that's the decentralization.
Sure.
I'm a decentralization maxi. Okay. And
Sure.
And if you ever watched our show before, Faz and I don't go more than 2 or 3 shows without a full on argument about decentralization. Okay.
Sure.
So I have 2 questions, and hopefully you'll be able to get through them very quickly, because I don't want to get in the weeds with decentralization. But one of the things that I've griped about repeatedly with some of the projects that claim to be decentralized is you have NerdNode or DeEEP Network that's pushing this software and controlling your software. You talked a little earlier about reaching into the box and tweaking what's necessary. How can it be decentralized when there's a central software and operators really doing what's necessary to make that run?
Yeah, so it has to start somewhere, first of all. So today, NerdNode is writing all of the software that runs the nodes. Because of that, we have a monopoly on understanding how that runs. We're working right now to publish a lot of that information. And our goal there is that as we publish basically frameworks and templates on how you can bring new node types into a network, that other people will contribute to those. So we won't be the only ones controlling those automation pieces. We'll be putting together the templates and the frameworks for how that happens and how that automation works. But we will not be the only ones doing that anymore. With that comes a level of responsibility for that service creator. And part of that responsibility will be, to a certain extent, being able to do the same things I'm talking about doing, of being able to log into that particular VM that particular node runs on to debug it. They'll also get information about the logs that come off of those. So all the logs will be encrypted with shared keys, and service creators will have access to those logs as well, because they'll be given they'll have a private key that they'll sign and put the public key on all the devices that then put the logs against it. Our goal is not to stay in that control mode for the long haul, and to be able to incentivize other people to do this same thing. So if you look at the way our tokenomics is structured and our distribution of rewards, right now users get 50% of the earnings from a node running on a box. But if you look at the tokenomics, 20% of that is going to NerdNode for operational costs and marketing costs. and 30% is going to DeEEP Network. We're looking, and we've already started talking to a couple different people about having similar role to what NerdNode does, to be able to go out and sell services and use capacity on the DeEEP Network. We do not want NerdNode to be the only one that can do that, because to your point, that we become a choke point. If NerdNode disappears, all these boxes are useless. We are building out.
That's going into my next question.
NerdNode is the first partner that in the DeEEP Network that is able to resell services. But eventually we think that anybody will be able to do that. And it will actually be pretty easy to do that. And they can earn that 20%. They can choose to how they give out that 20%, or they can choose to take more or less. And so we think that can open up the network quite a bit over the long haul.
So my last question is hopefully really simple and really short, because Faz is itching for a question too. We've seen a lot of these platforms come out. You're able to just jump on there and do whatever it is that you want to do, right? So Faz has his bugs ecosystem, right? His zip bugs are awesome. You have zip bugs?
I don't.
If he wanted to create a zip bug node that would help distribute his books and his comics and his zip bugs, is he able to do that without the assistance of a centralized party? Or does he have to go through the DeEEP network in order to make that happen and get approvals? Do you see where I'm going with the decentralization part?
Yeah, so I think approvals will be required. Who makes those approvals, I think, is the important distinction. NerdNode itself is not going to be the only one making those approvals. There will be a committee that's voted on, and that's part of the token usage of DeEEP, is you get to vote, that will make these decisions. Over time, I can see that changing a little bit. But at the beginning, we need to engender trust in the network. And so zip bugs might be harmless to your home network, but somebody else might have a child porn hosting service that they want to put on this network. We want to ensure that all the services running on the network can comply with regulatory requirements for where they're being run. And so we're going to ask for attestation from node creators, because you don't want a service being assigned to a device in your home that gets the federal government or whatever your local, police force is knocking on your door and saying, "What the hell are you doing on your internet?" Right?
We don't need to get swatted. No.
Well, that just brings up that opens up a can of worms for me, because, and I'm just going to throw a bunch of them out there, and you can answer which one you want. So I understand.
Okay.
You're going to have some regulation stuff that's automatically going to kick people off the network, or kick certain things like programs off the network or whatever. That to me would seem almost automatic. What kind of worries me though, and I think Titan was telegraphing this, as far as the committee. And let me just throw some questions up to give you an understanding of what I'm getting at.
Sure.
One, who makes up this committee? Two, how are they put in place? Three, can I corner the market with this committee, perhaps get a lot of tokens and get myself put on the committee? So I'm worried, I'm basically wondering about the manipulation part of this. Can this committee be manipulated to be, the richest people are always going to be on the committee, or certain people with a lot of coins or whatever? Basically, what if my bugs hold an extreme political position? On Twitter, there's accounts that get banned all the time for saying things that aren't right, but the government kind of will and kind of won't go with that. And so I'm thinking about this committee that's going to decide on these things. I worry about how this committee is made up and how people are appointed to it.
We're working out. So right now, this is all inside NerdNode, which is legally an LLC. Our plan is over the next 18 months to work out the exact questions you're asking here and form this into a DAO. And in the charter of the DAO, to have those pieces detailed out. I don't have the answers to all of that right now. I think our goal in the short term is going to be picking solutions that earn the best for folks, right? Because ultimately, people are buying these boxes for passive income. Maybe down the road, and maybe not far down the road, there's an option where you can check, I don't care what runs in my box, let anything run. Maybe there's an option where,
Well, what if this is coming, trust me. I don't
yeah,
want you running anything on my box that disagrees with my political or religious position, whatever it might be.
sure. Yeah, I mean, I think we're trying to build all of this with a open source code forward approach. So if people want to contribute pieces that enable those types of switches to be thrown on people's boxes, I don't frankly see a problem with that. At NerdNode and DeEEP, our intent is not to wade into the political quagmire of
Oh, it's coming for you.
all of that.
It'll come.
However,
If you're
if
running,
people would like to do that and contribute code to that, we'll accept it to give people options, right?
well, if you're
If
running,
it's providing more freedom of choice of what people run, I don't have a problem with that.
if you're running this whoever's spearheading this node ecosystem, which is you guys are selling nodes and so on, and trying to make a DAO to where it can manage itself. But there's
Yep.
still going to be, I would assume, if it's not decentralized, a single point of failure that the government can go after and use to regulate you guys and say, we don't like these decisions that you've made.
Yeah.
I would hope that these nodes are standalone in such a way that the government can't just shut down an entity and the whole thing collapses.
Yeah, there are very few points of complete centralization like that in this network. There are essentially, at the moment, two, with plans to get rid of both of them. So the one is the piece I talked about earlier, which was the Intel AMT control. So, and that is primarily so that for these early boxes, if we screw something up, nobody has to mail a box back, right? Because that's expensive. We're trading a little bit of centralized control is a word for it. It's basically an emergency switch for us if we need to reflash things, is the way we're looking at it. It doesn't actually, the file systems are all encrypted, all of that. So we can't really get into the boxes with it. What we can do is completely delete them. And if somebody came at us with a legal subpoena warrant, et cetera, potentially that is a vector. We don't intend to do that forever. We're looking at that in these first boxes. And then there are ways that after we get more mature in the software, that we can actually disable that feature.
The committee that you're speaking of, I mean, even if you're talking about porn and stuff like that, this committee has to govern. This committee is going to, if they are able to get porn off of this, child porn off of this, they are going to be the entity that the government goes after. So Bitcoin, for example, is completely decentralized in such a way that the government can't go after one person to shut it down. I just want to make it clear where the centralization is and where it's planned to be. And it sounds like it's planned, from what you're saying, to be in this committee.
For curated services, that is accurate. Now, we talked earlier about NerdNode right now is one of those curators for services, right? So we pick what services run. Eventually, the goal is that other people will be able to do that exact same thing, and they can run other types of services, and you'll be able to choose who you want to be able to run those services.
Yes.
I think there is an option where you say, I don't want NerdNode controlling my stuff. I want Evil Hackers 12 to be in charge of my box, right? And Evil Hackers 12 says anybody can put anything on this, and here's the signing key out in ether, and you can do whatever you want with it, right?
I am putting all the Trump speeches ever made on Faz's box immediately. That is an OG founder's privilege.
And Titan's box is going to have all that child porn from everybody else. Just want to make that clear. I actually had some questions before all these follow-ups I had, because I got triggered by Titan's question. So I want to switch directions a little bit. You had said in the beginning that you're not looking to reward with accessories and stuff like that, which is admirable.
We're not looking to monetize accessories.
Yeah. And so my question is, then are you are you looking with perhaps tokens or whatever else to encourage people to trick out their system to make it, the biggest, baddest system or the biggest, baddest bandwidth that they can come up with?
Yeah, that I think naturally will occur. The better tricked out your box is, the more services it can run and the more valuable services it can run. Effectively, the way we've been thinking about, at least at NerdNode, and again, other people as we bring on other partners that can manage things on the network can choose differently. But the way we've been looking at pricing is basically to set pricing based on resource utilization of the boxes. So when you come in and say, I want to run this type of node, we analyze how much RAM it uses, how much CPU it uses, how much disk it uses, and that's how the price gets set. The more of those bandwidth and CPU, RAM, disk, et cetera, that you have on your box, the more you have the ability to earn, right? And so if you plug in USB disks, if you plug in external GPUs, like things like that over time, as we figure out how to take advantage of those tools, you'll be able to earn more.
That answer you gave totally sparked a question that I'm dying to know. But is this network going to be sharded in that if a workload is put out, and let's say a hospital comes to you guys and says, you know what, we want to store our inventory for our network of 73 hospitals on your network. Mm-hmm. And Faz gets part of that, I get part of that, you get part of that, and those all communicate together? Or is it all 73 hospitals are going to be pushed to one box and one workload?
No, the goal is that those all get distributed, charted, pinned, et cetera, in different places. And that creates that redundancy. There's a number of tools that we're using under the hood to help with that. I think we're trying to do some education for different node providers that are coming to us and helping them learn how to do those types of things as well.
And the other question that brought up is, you've talked a couple of times about the rewards for the node runners, right? Mm-hmm. So is that wallet slant account slant whatever pile of tokens going to also be on the nodes, or are we going to have to connect a separate wallet to that, right? Because if I want to pay the network to store some of my stuff, or Faz wants to put his zip bugs on there and store that, he's going to have to pay for that on the front end, right? Even though he'll get some rewards back.
Correct.
But how is that going to work with this box? Is it all self-contained? Are we going to use MetaMask, something different?
Yeah, so the box has its own wallet. So we're using Firefly nodes, which come with a wallet that is dedicated for that box, and then we will link and pair your wallet with it. So can be a delegated wallet, effectively, is what we're looking at.
So are we going to have our own seeds, or is that going to be, we just have to trust you? You
will be able to pull your own information off of that. Yes. That is basically your ownership of that device.
So will DeEEP or NerdNode or anybody have access to that seed phrase?
The way that's going to work will be, it'll be tied to the TPM of that device. So it will not have direct access from our team. Here's the real.
Am I going to be able to pull that off that box onto a private wallet?
Are you going to be able to pull what?
If I have tokens on this wallet that's on the device, right? And I want to pull it. What network are we running on here? Is it ETH? Is it Base? Avalanche. Am I going to be able to pull those out, or do I have to leave them in that box with just TPM, hopefully keeping me safe?
No, you'll be able to pull them out 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're building them on Avalanche because they have really good support for what they used to call subnets, what they now call L1s. So we can build a full network that all the gas fees can be low and all of that on. And Avalanche has great support now for bridging between any EVM based token. So that's another big reason we chose it, because our expectation is we'll get a lot of people who want to pay using the native token they're earning from their device, or from their node. So that should let them be able to convert that on the fly to DeEEP is the goal.
That's fantastic. I love the Avalanche network myself. I do. The bridging, has it gotten easier? Because I use the core bridge over there, and man, that thing takes like an hour to move tokens across it. It's like ridiculous.
They just did a new release on stuff, and Anthony's been playing with it. I haven't played with it much, but it came out about a month ago.
Oh, nice.
So it's pretty new.
My major questions have been asked. Faz, what else do you got?
All right. Well, I've been taking a lot of notes, but I don't think we need to get to all of them. Well, I had a question about how much maintenance these nodes would require. You answered some of that with the security question. Basically, I'd love to just be able to plug this thing in and forget about it. Is it going to be that easy?
It's going to be that easy. There's a few minor caveats to that. If you plug it in between your modem and your router, it'll be that easy. If you plug it in behind your router and your router supports universal plug and play, which most routers do, it'll be that easy. If you have universal plug and play turned off, you will have to go into your router and turn on what's called a demilitarized zone, which will let all the unfiltered internet traffic flow to our box so that we can take advantage of different ports. But that's really the most complex aspect of the setup, is turning on those port forwarding through a demilitarized zone.
Okay. I'm not going to mess with that. That's not fun at all.
It's actually pretty easy. Most routers have made it, because a number of Xbox games over the years have required that to be turned on to port to an Xbox. So most routers have that as a single click option. You pick, what device you want and enable DMZ, and it works. So it's like 3 or 4 clicks typically.
I have a last question here, and is something you mentioned in the very beginning about AI associated with these nodes. How does that work? What's going on?
Nothing unique in our regard at this point. We will be running like eighth year checker nodes and those types of things on the box. So we're participating in some of the AI projects, but there isn't we don't have an AI component to the solution, other than we can run AI inference solutions on CPU and on the Intel GPUs. And if you plugged in an external GPU or a PCIe GPU over time, we could enable that. It hasn't been higher in our priority list. Again, kind of what I talked about at the top of the show around a lot of these are using those, $20,000 to $50,000, NVIDIA cards right now, which is just out of the price point for most people's, home applications.
Oh,
I said, you think little out of the price range? I'm telling you, man.
So my last question is, okay, great. I plug in my node, and whatever. I'd actually like to possibly learn about different projects. I mean, I can you guys tell me, that this is rhetorical, more, when this thing gets moving, can you tell me what projects I can join up with, or projects that I can run on my server?
Yeah.
Would I?
And you can actually.
I'd love to be able to plug it in and say, "Hey, I want to do City at Home on this thing," or whatever you guys approve of. That will probably make me something.
Yeah, and we're working with a handful of folks to do that kind of off the bat as well. I talked about storage chain a little bit earlier. That's one of them that we're going to basically say, so you don't have to buy a node for them. All you have to do is pay some collateral, and you stake some collateral and you're running a node. So that'll be a real easy one to be able to do. We're also talking to a company called Roam and a couple others in that regard, which basically allow you to turn this box into a Wi-Fi access point that other people can pay you tokens to join. So that'll be one that, we're working with them right now. It's not all finalized.
I was just going to say the same thing. So yeah, I heard you talking about your IoT experience and the Helium thing that Faz mentioned. It sounds an awful lot like Helium.
Yeah, it's similar to Helium, slightly different network, but a lot of the same principles that they've done over 5G and over LoRa, these other guys are doing over Wi-Fi, right? And this box already has a Wi-Fi card in it. Our hope is we'll be able to partner with Roam, and people will be able to, add that very easily with low cost to the box. So we're trying to find those value adds that are simple to add, that add extra earning potential for folks. Hopefully it'll be something that, like, when you launch the box, and probably we won't have this, like, the boxes you guys ordered too early, so you won't have this experience right off the bat, right? But as we build this out, when you first launch a device, it'll be like click, 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 add all these node types. That's where we want to head. So if anybody's listening that has node types that match up with that type of thing, hit me up, and we'd love to chat with you about that. But we're getting into a lot of discussions on how do we make it easy for people to participate when they set their box up by just, clicking I accept, and they're off and going.
Yeah.
It has to be. It absolutely has to be. That is something I'm struggling with another project right now, getting a node running, and it's been months already, and I still haven't collected a thing. And I go ask for help, and nobody knows what's going on. Right. So
yeah, that would be nice.
That is a concern.
That would be nice if you guys can actually get like cheat sheet on a lot of different types of nodes to run on there. Work with these companies and make it easy for me to just get going with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I see so many opportunities to reach out and work together with other projects.
Yep, for sure. And I think there's lots of opportunities there. We're scraping the tip right now of what that can be. I think that we definitely want to enable people to put things on to earn passive income on this, right? That's the whole goal of this whole platform. So for sure on top of mind for us.
I had questions at the beginning of this, when this whole thing first came out, when I bought my node. I'm thinking, I'm a little nervous that these are going to be some tiny little boxes like a Raspberry Pi with a a nice black cover on it that I could put a Faz sticker on the top of, and I was real nervous. But tonight I learned a lot more, that these are some beefy boxes, man. This is not some Raspberry Pi with a black shell over it at all. And that in itself makes me feel a heck of a lot better about this, that I'm going to have a powerful box from the get-go, and I'm not going to be limited to just 2 projects when everybody else can get 7.
Right.
I mean, this is that was huge for me, at least. That's a great takeaway from this one.
All right, guys. Well, I got to get running and get my kids to bed. Any last questions?
Yeah, I one last question. Specs. Do you have anything you can tell us about specs on the boxes?
Oh yeah, I got lots of things I can tell you. They're running Intel i9s, so top of the line Intel solutions, 32 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte SSD and NVMe SSD, so they're super fast. They've got USB 4 up to 40 gigabits per second, 2 ports.
Oh, nice.
2 or 3 ports on that. 2 10 gigabit SPF network ports, so you can hook it up to fiber directly or to copper, and 2.5 gigabit copper connections, so you can plug it into a regular RJ45 Ethernet cord. They draw about 100 watts when they're normally loaded, which is similar to an incandescent light bulb, right? So not drawing a whole bunch of power either.
If I have 27 nodes, do I stand to earn more money with them, or is it going to top out if I just have more than a few?
Yeah, so effectively the limiting factor is going to be the number of IP addresses you have and the bandwidth you have at your facility or your home or your business or wherever you install this device. If you plug in a whole bunch together, we do have some projects that we're looking at clustering some of these together. That won't be available day one, but we actually do run clustered devices right now at nerd nodes. We know how to do that, and it's in our plan. But you'd be able to like stack 3 of them together and run some higher end like computing solutions, or even more than 3 potentially. So we'll be releasing kind of more information about that as we get further down the development timeline on that. Effectively, it's going to come down to compute versus throughput. And right now, I would say most of the services we're looking at, unless you have like gigabit or better internet, you're not going to want to put a whole bunch of these boxes in one location.
Ben, I have to tell you, this was fantastic tonight. Thank you so very much for giving up some of your precious time. I know you're a busy guy, and sitting down and talking with us tonight. This has enlightened me on like 10 different levels. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you guys for the interest and giving me the opportunity. I think we've got an exciting project here, and we're trying to grassroots a lot of this. We didn't go raise a whole bunch of money and throw it all at marketing and investors. We're trying to give all this back to the community and make sure that the profits stay with the community as well. We really think that this could be a true grassroots, community-driven platform.
That's right.
We're all going 1,000 miles an hour with your hair on fire. I don't have any left.
And on that note,